Just what makes that little old ant think he'll move that rubber tree plant? Anyone knows an ant can't move a rubber tree plant, but he's got high hopes. He's got high hopes. He's got high.
Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. A few people have asked how I keep my ants and how I keep my termites. So what I thought I'd do, I've done a little of Adam's Ants DIY, and I'm going to do several videos which cover my setups, how I make them, and hopefully will give you a few hints and tips on how to do it yourselves. This isn't a definite guide. You feel free to make your designs the way you want them. Feel free to go off my video and do your own thing. But this is what has worked for me for several years. My ants seem to love my designs. Colonies grow and they seem to do perfectly fine. So we'll get started. So the first thing you want to do is you have to decide what species of ants you want to keep and if it is suitable for a plaster nest. If you're keeping things like the Asian army ant, I can't pronounce it, Philododon diversus I think it's called, they're not suitable for plaster nests. They produce a high population very quickly, and once they get to a certain size they will actually chew through plaster. Plaster isn't the best material for colonies that are very vigorous. The Camponotus colonies will do fantastic in it, Lassus niger will do fantastic in it. My termites have done brilliant in it, and my Harpegophagus venator have done absolutely brilliant in it as well, and I've got larvae currently pupating in there now, which I'll show you later. So the first thing you want to do is you want to have a plan. You want to know what sort of chambers you want. You want to get an A4 piece of paper. You want to sketch out your design on your piece of paper, as I have done here. Once you've sketched out your design, do remember that when you sketch out your design, when you come to mould your nest, the design is going to be flipped over. So you're going to want to do a design and then draw the same design on the back. So you've got a design on both sides, so you can see. So when it's flipped over, it will be where you want it. So if you can see what I've done here, I've drawn out my design. It is a massive design. This is just page 1. I have this is for my termite colony, so I've drawn out a queen and I've drawn out my design here. These are the glass slides. I've linked them all up so I know where it wants to go. Because I want the tubes at the front of the setup and this is the back of the setup, I've actually flipped it over, because when I come to mould my plaster, once the mould's finished, it's going to be flipped over, if you can understand where I'm coming from. So what I've done, now I've got my glass slides. Now what we'll do is we'll go over the measurements, so you can get a rough idea of what boxes I use. Okay, so what I've done, most people tend to use like a plastic container or a food storage container, anything that will hold liquid you can use as a plaster mould. I tend to find though plaster isn't very good at being removed. If you don't get it perfect, as you remove it from your mould, you can actually crack the plaster, and when you've put a lot of time into effort into actually making the chambers with your clay and pouring the plaster in, getting it to the right consistency, and then you go and actually break your mould, it's quite frustrating. So what I do is, my local DIY store, where I get all my supplies, is I've gone and got some 4mm thick Perspex sheeting. And I've had it cut. They do cut it for me there. If they don't worry. If you are good at cutting Perspex, fantastic. If not, find an adult to help you if you're underage, because of course you're going to need someone to cut the acrylic for you. Now this is 4mm thick. I wouldn't advise any thinner than 4mm because it will flex and it won't produce a good mould. And all it is, it's held together by silver like duct tape. Which is strong and waterproof, which is brilliant when I pour it in. And the dimension I've got the 2 side panels, which are 19cm by 6.5 cm. I've got these 2 end panels, which are 6.5 cm by 10 cm. And then I've got a base, which is 10 cm by 19 cm. Now the reason I've got these dimensions, and the reason is this specific size, will come in other videos, but the first and foremost is I buy some, and I'll link it all in the link bar, so don't worry about it. I buy, they're called clear Stuart Hatchling boxes. Now they're for reptiles, but they're basically like a giant Ferrero Rocher box, and they come with a lid. Now this one's been a bit damaged because I've cut holes in it and God knows what. I've sealed it up so it's watertight again. Of course they come crystal clear and good. Now what I find is the plaster nests actually fit perfectly inside these trays, which makes it brilliant when you've got a load lined up in your setup, or in my incubation greenhouse box. When I've got them all lined up in a line, all I have to do is, when the nest chambers go dry, is pour a bit of water into each tray, and the plaster absorbs it up, and it slowly gets absorbed up and goes into the chambers, which is perfect. Doesn't disturb the ants at all, doesn't worry them. You can gauge how much you need, and you can add a bit, make sure you don't waterlog the nest. It's a really simple, easy method. So this is what I do. Like I say, I'll link the boxes, where I'll get the boxes from, the hatchling boxes. I will link that in the description above the video. Any supplies, acrylic tubing, I shall link the supplier in the description. I don't know if you'll get it. I'm from England, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to get it from your country. I can't help you there. It depends on if you can track down a supplier, or it's on it. The main shop I use is eBay. It's a worldwide thing, so maybe you could get it delivered from the UK to eBay. I'm not sure. But what we'll do now is, you make your box. Make sure you stick it together. It's all held together tightly. You don't want it flexing. And so you've got your box ready for the plaster. Then what you want to do is you want to get your glass slide. Now I go to a glazier's and they actually cut me some glass slides. And what I'll do, I'll just measure this up and I'll give you the dimensions of that. What you want to do, guys, your glass. Now, one thing I wouldn't advise is to use acrylic for the actual viewing panel. The reason is, if it's going into the sort of setup that I've got, the heat will cause the perspex to basically bow, which isn't very good for the ants because they will climb out from underneath it. So what I did, I went to a local glazier's and got him to cut some 17cm by 8cm picture frame glass. Now this is only about 2mm thick. It's not treated by anything, so basically it hasn't got a smash proof coating on it, so when it does crack, it produces shards of glass. So all you kids out there, please get adult supervision before handling this sort of glass. Make sure when you get it cut that it goes around the edge with a special machine to take all the rough edge off, because otherwise, and I wouldn't advise doing this, otherwise that will get very sharp and you'll cut yourself, and it's a nasty paper cut, guys, so it's not nice. It lasts for a very long time. So what you want to do, you've got your glass, it's 17cm by 8cm. It fits perfectly into your box, your acrylic box you've made. Once gone in, you will have about half a centimetre rim around the side of your glass, which is perfect when you pour your plaster in, because that will give you a little bit of leverage, so when your glass comes out you don't break your plaster. But we'll go over that after, guys. That'll be another stage and I'll show you how to do that successfully. So there we go, guys, that's done. What we'll do then, we'll move on to our mould. I've done the glass, I've drawn around it, I've got my image on the back. I've then basically shined a light through and traced again the chamber, because this is basically going to be a negative, and what it's going to do is you're going to switch it over once you've moulded it, and this will be your top of your mould. So you do it on the back here. Now what happens with mine is the tube to my setup is going to be on the front of the plaster nest when it's finished. So what I've done, I've got my chambers connecting here, and when I switch it over, my tube, as it is there, will be on the front of my mould, which is what I want. Then when it goes in the setup, I'll have my tube running at the front of my setup, which makes good for observation. So what you want to do, now your material you use for moulding is purely up to you. Some people use like a salt dough, some people use Play-Doh, some people use like plasticine. This is artificial like clay. It's not actual clay because it doesn't set hard, but it's like a plasticine sort of clay sort of feel to it. It's quite oily. It never dries out, which is fantastic. It's brilliant. It doesn't absorb water, doesn't absorb any moisture or anything, doesn't absorb the plaster, which is brilliant when you go to take it out. I wouldn't advise the use of salt dough and Play-Doh. The reason is they do absorb water. I mean, they are basically like flour-based materials. What you'll find is you'll pour your plaster in, it will look perfect, then when you come to take out your mould, you'll actually have layers of Play-Doh and salt dough actually in the actual mould, and once it gets absorbed into that plaster, it's very hard to get out, and some of the Play-Dohs leave a nasty colour like a tint, so you'll have like a pink chamber. It's not the nicest thing, guys. It's not good for the ants. It's not good when you come to look at them. It doesn't give a nice feel, natural look. So I use this clay and it works out perfectly. So what I'll do, guys, I'm going to carry on going here. I'm going to basically go over my outline, flesh my mould out. Once I've done this, I'll get back to you. Hey guys, so what I've done, I've got my modelling clay. It's all in my glass sheet, as you can see. I've attached it to the sides. Now if you can just see here, I've got two little like collars of acrylic tubing in my setup each side. Now this is what I use to attach my nests together. I don't drill into my plaster. I like to pour it in for it to set around these collars. It's all in place. It's all airtight and all. There's no gaps or anything for the ants to get out, which is brilliant. I've got my little rim around my glass, which is what I want. So just make sure that's set in place, done and dusted. Now these acrylic collars are made out of acrylic tubing. It's pretty strong. It's like Perspex, like wood acrylic. I've got a larger size, and I've also bought a smaller size that fits smoothly into this larger size, so it slots right in. Now this works fantastically when you want to attach your nest together, because what you do, you have your collar, you put it in your mould, pour your plaster in, then you'll have this little collar which permanently sits in your plaster. And then when you remove your plaster mould, remove the clay out of it, you'll have this little bit where you can just easily join up your nests, which is a really easy solution compared to drilling into your plaster mould and cracking it, or not having the hole fit snugly and ants getting out, which works perfectly. So now I've done that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up some plaster. So you'll see me mix up some plaster. I'll pour it in, and then it's just basically waiting for that to set, and then we'll go ahead and carry on with more stages. Hey guys, so what we're going to do now is, I'm not going to basically show, I'm going to mix the plaster. I'm not going to tell you what measurements to use, because it all depends on where you buy your plaster from. Each plaster house has different measurements, but I tend to know that my mould tends to take 1.5 bags of plaster. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to add my plaster, my first lot. Make sure I've got it all out because I don't want to waste any. Add my water, which is a rough guess, tends to be a jug. That will do. Then you want to mix your plaster to make sure you get to a nice consistency. This might be a bit too. This is a bit too liquefied, but make sure you don't breathe in the smoke from the plaster as you're mixing it. Make sure your plaster is, you can feel when you mix with a fork, you can usually feel the plaster bashing against your fork, and you can feel the lumps hitting against it, so make sure when, as you're mixing, there's no lumps, you can't feel any. I'm going to add a little bit more, almost half a bag, about a quarter of a bag more. And what I'm looking for, I just want like a little bit of a creamy consistency, watery but not too creamy. It's still watery but a thick looking consistency. Well, a thick looking consistency. A watery sort of bubbly consistency. How to explain it, I don't know. You don't want it too thick because the plaster sets extremely quickly once it starts off. This is getting there now. It's quite thick, you can see, and there's a lump in there I can feel. Just filled it with the fork. Okay guys, I've got my plaster. It's mixed to the right consistency, well, what I viewed as the right consistency. I tend to go by sight. I mean, you can go by the instructions, but I tend to go by sight. I've made enough plaster nest to know what I want it like. I've got my nest set up. I've got my plastic mould. I've also got one that I pre-done earlier, which is going to link up to this one. which it's turned on its back, because that would be the way it would have been cast. I've made sure that this tube collar fits up to the tube collar in this mould. As you can see, there's a tube collar there. I've made sure that that lines up with this one, so when the mould is set, they actually line up. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. So I've just done that. I'm just going to mess with it a bit because it's not quite lined up. Right, that's lined up. And all we'll do, give it one last mix to make sure it's all firmly mixed. And just pour her in, making sure the glass doesn't move. Make sure nothing moves. There should be enough. I have judged it. There's usually just enough to reach the rim. Yep, there is. There we go. Just enough there. So it's been about half an hour since I've mixed my plaster Paris, and as you can see, it's pretty rock hard. I use a box of plaster Paris called Anita's Plaster Paris. It comes in like a brownie coloured box with pink lettering all over it. It sets very quick if you basically mix it fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the end where I taped up last, which is that end there, put it on its side, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove the tape, but only remove it from one end only. And the reason I do this is because it should give enough flexibility to be able to take this end panel off and remove the mould, but remove the plaster, but without damaging my mould. Which means then if I want to reuse it again, I don't have to tape up all the sides, I can just tape up this one end. So what I'm going to do, remove these. Remove this one. Okay, and very gently lift the panel up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to very flex these, if it will. That's it, flex that one. Flex that one. Flex that one. I'm going to put some tissue to lower it down onto, because it will still contain water, and what this will do, this piece of tissue will help drain the water out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it on there and very gently ease it away. And it should just slowly drop out. There we go. And there we go, there's our mould. Put that to one side. And what you want to do now, you want to get a piece of tissue. And what you want to do, you just want to go around the edge, just clearing up all these rough edges. Could use your finger. Just run your finger around and smooth them all out. Look at the sides. And if you can see, we've got that 1/2 centimetre rim around it, which is perfect, which will aid us removing it. We've got our ring here, which we can put the tubing in, which the tube will fit in. It's sealed, we've not drilled it, it's moulded around it, which is perfect. We just go around and tidy up all the edges. Right, I'll finish up tidying up this, making sure these edges are smoothed out, and then I'll come back to you and we'll start removing the glass panel. Okay guys, see you in a minute. So what we've done, I've cleared off all the edges. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this Stanley blade. Now kids, please get adult supervision or adults help. This is the Stanley blade, it's extremely sharp. And what we're going to do, we're going to very gently find the edge of the glass, and we're going to just very gently just run the blade, try not to cut in too deep, just around the edge, making sure you put the plaster off. Do it each side. And all this does, this just loosens it up around the edge. Sometimes you'll have plaster, if the glass doesn't sit tight against the bottom of your acrylic mould, you'll have plaster come out the side here and drip underneath, and then you just go around with the blade and it just clears up the edge, makes it a bit smoother. Now what we're going to do, we're going to remove the glass. Now what you want to do, you want to get a piece of tissue or something, because you're going to need to support your plaster. You don't want to damage it too much. You're going to fold it over several times. And what you're going to do, you're going to get your Stanley blade, and you're going to find a nice wide piece. Don't do on the ends because they're usually thinner. You're going to find a nice wide piece. You're going to cut a little bit of a half circle out a little bit. Do it again. Right, so you've got a bit of a half circle. Try not to go too deep, just so it reaches the glass. And then all you want to do then is you want to get your blade, put your tissue there, because what that will do is that will stop it should take some of the strain off the plaster and stop it from cracking. And all you're going to do is with the tip of the blade, you're going to very gently apply pressure. And what will happen slowly, you'll see the glass, you'll see air start getting underneath it. And if you do it slowly and gently, it should just pop up. And you've not damaged your plaster. And then what you can do, just get your finger, just gently smooth that out. And then you've got a little tiny bit to leave your window up when you've put it on and off. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a spoon off the table. And what we're going to do, we're going to start removing this clay. Now what you want to do, you want to get your spoon. I usually use a spoon, it's usually easier. It's a metal spoon. It's got normal teaspoon, but I like having metal. I don't like the plastic handles because they're never good for the job. And you want to gently scoop out this clay. And what I'm going to do, I'll do this first one and then I'll go away and carry on doing the rest. You pull it out gently, and there's your first chamber. There we go. Now, what you want to do now, that's your first chamber. Now, if you've done the tunnels the way I've done the tunnels, you'll find that you'll have a lot of plaster underneath, that goes underneath. Now, to stop it from breaking too much, what you want to do, you want to get like a brush, which I've done. You want to just drive it in to where the clay is, where your synthetic clay is, and if you slowly push, it should pop out without damaging your tunnel that much. If you do it again, just slowly push, dragging with your brush. Of course you'll get some fine bits crack. If you carry on doing it, eventually you'll slowly clean out a tube. And what you can do then is tidy it up. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to go away. I'm going to stop the video now. I'm going to finish off excavating all this. Once it's excavated, I'm then going to show you how to just smooth the edges up with basically just a paintbrush. Smooth up the edges, make sure it looks a bit presentable. And then what we'll do then, we'll get to painting the inside of the chambers. See you in a minute, guys. So I've managed to get all the clay out of my mould. So as you can see here, move the clay to the side. I've got it all out. I've got my empty mould here. The first thing I'm going to do is first of all check. I've got all this like clay out of this ring. I've done it this side as well, so there's none in there. What I'm going to do now is basically see if it attaches to the nest I made before. So I'm going to put this tube in here. It fits in perfectly. Here's one I made earlier. I'm going to move this over so that it lines up, and I see right away that it fits perfectly, so they both join together. So there's my two nests set up, fantastic. So I'll just move this one away and place it out of the way. And what we're going to do now is, you've got your nest, we're just going to tidy it up a bit. When you've put the clay in, when you've poured the mould in that, the plaster tends to go over the chambers a little bit, so you'll end up with like this little sharp edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a brush and I'm going to slowly just take it around each of the chambers, smoothing off the edges. You see, it just breaks through that little plaster, makes the edges nice and smooth. And I'll just do this for every chamber. Smooth it out. Just run the brush along, slowly scraping at the clay. And if done very gently, you'll end up do it around the chambers. I'll do it around this tunnel as well. If you see this tunnel here, I'll just gently scrape around, and it just basically stops it from cracking. Stops the bits from splintering and dropping in because they're very fine. And I'm just doing that, and I'll just do it to this tunnel as well. Okay, and I'll just do it to this edge here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, carry on with this. Once I've gone on the edges, I'm going to then get ready to paint it. And what I'll do then is I'll show you how to paint it. So what I've done, I finished off my plaster nest. I've got my brush, I've gone around the edge like I showed you just to do. I've put my glass plate in to make sure it's okay and it fits okay. So as you can see from my mould, glass fits perfectly. There's a bit of condensation which is started to come on the glass now due to the fact that it's quite humid in the chambers. But what we're going to do, we're going to paint the chambers. Now when I say paint, I don't mean like paint like as in poster paints or watercolour paints. I mean actually I'm going to paint it with soil. And the way I do that is, let me just remove my glass and put it on tissue out the way. I use a little like glass sucker, the type that you put teddies on the car windows, the little suckers or thermometers in fish tanks. Just one of them, press down with the little, and it's easy to remove your glass. Now what I've done, I've gone out into the garden and I've dug down about 1 foot and I've found like a clayey type mud. I've sieved it a little bit and I've mixed it with water in a pestle and mortar. Now kids, make sure you don't use your mum's pestle and mortar because she won't be too happy to find you mixing mud in it. I bought this especially for this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix the mud. I'm probably going to have to add just a little bit more water. That should be alright for now, till it makes a smooth paste. Just mix it around and grind up all your soil with water to make like a little paste. Then what you want to do is, let me just get a brush. Some water. Alright, let me just add a bit, drop more water to it. Get me paint brushes. That one there. Just grind up that soil into the water, it'll make a nice paste. Now if you're worried about pests and diseases in the soil, the one thing I recommend is some people do put it in the microwave, some people do put it in the oven to heat the soil up. I personally don't. I've never had any problems with ants getting diseases or mites. Like I said, I dig down about 1 foot. Most pests and diseases are on the surface of the soil. If you dig down about 1 foot, you should be pretty okay. But like I say, this is the way I do things. It's not a rule. I'm not saying yes, do this. It's what works for me. You might want to put it in the microwave your soil before you mix it with water. You might want to put it in the oven to cook all the bad stuff out of it. But I think ants live in the soil, it's natural for them. I don't want to take any goodness out of the soil by cooking it because I do know it tends to go quite bad. So what I'm going to do is, now I've mixed that into a paste, I'm going to get my brush and I'm just going to slowly paint the chambers. I'm going to do several coats. I'm just going to do around the edge as well. Now I only do around the edge and I only do the chambers. I don't actually paint at the chambers. What I'm going to do, I'm going to do this, add a couple of coats, make sure it's nice and thick, make sure it's, you don't want it too thick, but you just want it to cover the plaster. And what this also does is, once you've watered your plaster, after a while what will happen is, when you water your plaster, the soil will be a nice dark colour. And as your plaster dries out, your soil will actually dry out and it will give you a good telltale sign to water your nests. It's quite good, it goes quite a light colour and it works perfectly. And it's nice and natural. The ants walk in there and they think, hey, we're in a nice soil-based chamber, and it doesn't seem to bother them. They seem to actually prefer these nests than actually going into a normal plaster empty nest. So I'm going to do a few more coats of this, and once I've finished, I'll come back to you guys, I'll give you a quick view of it, and that's basically it. Okay guys, so I've painted my nest, as you can see. I've put the glass in, it's all been soil painted. I'm now going to attach it to the other two nests, and then that's it, we're all done. So I'm Adam, and this has been Adam Ants. Thank you for watching, guys.
An ant can't move a rubber tree plant, but he's got